Good morning. It is Saturday, and as I said, I'll give a bit more of a detailed explanation on my latest project about the reality of your day, the fantasies you may have during the course of the day, and the visual concepts you have come in your head. You know, you could be going shopping, you could be walking down the street, you could be sitting in a park, and what your body's doing and how it's relating to the environment. You could be sitting with someone and talking, and then you have this fantasy come in your head in regard to the sexual encounter, sexual coupling, you know, and the thoughts in your head obviously are not part of the reality of the situation, but they are real in regard to the images you can see in front of you. Certain aspects of, you know, your day and your environment can spark these visual stimulus for sexual desire and for fulfillment in regard to sexual expression. You know, there's many things that you see in your day that have symbolic meaning for sexual positions, body forms, the breast, penis, the buttocks. You know, that you just only need to look around and they are there. You know, if sex is on the brain, then there's sort of things around you that can stimulate desire for sexual experience. Now obviously when you're going shopping and going about your daily routine, no one is aware of what is in your mind. No one's aware that you're feeling horny or you just want to have sex, you know. And I like the aspect of the two things being so poles apart, you know. Now the awkwardness or the complete opposite of the situations, you know, when you go about your daily routine, it's methodical, it's lives within the laws of civil community. You know, you obey the laws, you know, and you go about your daily business. But the sexual experience, to me, has no boundaries. It is about your own upbringing, your own standards, your own ability to experiment, and your own desires and what you use or what you think to express that during your sexual experience, whether it be on your own or with someone or with more than two, or, you know, whatever floats your boat. But how you express yourself is within. There's a certain frustration, and it fights against the actual laws of civil community. You know, that's why ultimately your sexual desires are expressed within the confines of your bedroom or your house. You know, you don't walk down the street and you decide, Jesus, I could do with a fuck, and then grab your partner and you go for it. It doesn't happen. Well, if it did happen, you'd be up before the law. You know, so you have this fantasy and you just really want to do it, but you can't. So what I want to do in these works is to bring the two together to make the fantasy happen. You know, in a finished work, the two aspects of your life, or the two aspects I'm focusing on, are there on the canvas, and you have the reality of your environment, and then the actual painting I've done on top is the fantasy visualized. So, you know, for me, I could be walking through the woods or whatever, and I have this sexual desire to take sexual experience into me, and I can't. So what I do, I use a photograph of the environment, i.e. the words, and then paint the sexual experience on top, so the two are combined. And I hope then, in the finished result, that there is that conflict of stimulus, there is that sort of awkwardness, but there's also that desire, so that the painting itself burns the feelings within you. You know, Christ, I would love to walk through the woods and do that, or I'd love to be sitting in a park and my partner just sits on top of me and we just ride. You know, art is about bringing different folds of imagination together and putting them in a real situation, but without upsetting anyone. So your fantasies are there in the environment you'd love to screw or experience something for yourself. So I don't know, it may not work, but to aid the whole process I'm using mixed media, which is not something I've done before. I know it's not new, where photographs are used and painting is done over the top. It's not a new thing, but I'm trying to use the two things together to give the message and the narrative across, to tell the story by using the two elements, the actual paint and the photograph. So what I have here is a work in progress. If I try to explain, perhaps it'll make things a little bit clearer. I must admit I'm not very good at explaining my art. I let the art explain itself really. I just enjoy myself and see what develops. But here it is. We have a photograph, and this is it within a ruined house, and it's quite dark and isolated and whatever. And what we have here is a couple having sex. The lady's obviously taking it from behind, but what I'm doing is laying down pen to give illustration to movement, and then gradually laying down paint on top. And I don't think really there's going to be a completely finished painting of the figures. I think there's elements of the background or the environment could be left to represent the different shades of the body's tones. I sometimes believe that less is more. I think in a woman's face, I just love this. I just love the fact that with so many sort of like pen strokes and a few bits of paint, the expression of the face is there. As I've said before, it's not so much a female face. In regard to the man, it's not so much a man's face, because, as I said before, when you're having sex, I think the actual mindsets become one. You'd hope they become one, so you work in unison for your joint pleasures. So, you know, the features of the female and the male become one. It's only the actual body itself has the obviously anatomical differences. But that is it. You know, I'm not much more I can say. You've got the environment in paint, in photographic form, and then I do the artwork on top. Now, you don't see it at the moment, but this particular photograph will then be stuck onto a black canvas, and the edges will be painted into the black canvas, so the actual photograph and the artwork on top become part of the canvas, and then it becomes the artwork in itself. I'm going to give a thick border around the photograph on canvas to give it sort of like, I don't know, a sense of looking through a window, being a voyeur, you know, to the experience, and not being seen. And then I'll gloss over the whole image and canvas so it becomes, you know, a high resolution, you know, in quality. This one, oh dear, this one here is a work in progress, and as you may see, it's actually, what I've done is quite simple, isn't it? It's not exactly rocket science. I've done a negative of the original image, and no real reason. It's just about experimenting. You know, experimentation is what I like to do. I don't like to have any rules. So I think it's okay. I mean, I suppose there's a sort of ghosty element to it now, and a bit spooky really. So, you know, for sexual arousal is probably the furthest from what you'd want. But obviously with a lighter background, then the image worked up in black pen stands out more. And on this one I will lay paint, but I'll probably lay less paint on this one because obviously the marks stand out more than this one. Another aspect of the project I'm going to investigate is not about, you know, fantasies within an environment on its own. There's another aspect which I may investigate, and as I mentioned on my blogs and Twitter or whatever, it involves me. Now, I may have mentioned about me being nude. That I'm not sure about, because one, I don't have the body, and two, I don't think it's necessary. But what I've done here is to illustrate how the two things can combine. Now, if I explain the photograph, then it would probably show that there's more to the process than meets the eye. This photograph for me is obviously me pulling a funny face, which I often do in photographs. I've got this sort of childish habit of just pulling a face, because I don't like my photograph taken. That's probably the nuts and bolts of it. But it was on a boat on the Thames, and sitting around me were other people. Now obviously for a different, you know, multitude of reasons, I don't want the people in the image. One, they may not appreciate it. Two, I don't know who the hell they are, so I can't ask their permission. And three, it would distract from, you know, the main subject. So what I did, the photograph itself, I isolated me, and then the backgrounds and the people in it, I created a motion blur in a vertical sense. So, and then soft focused it. Now, there's two things that have come by this, and again it's by experimentation. It wasn't a deliberate instruction I gave to myself to do. It was just experimenting on the main computer using Photoshop. And the image in isolation is quite Bacon-esque. You know, as I've said before, I'm a big fan of Francis Bacon. I just think his work is just astounding. You know, not a lot of people, well, I can't say that. There's people who don't like his work for many reasons, because it's too violent, or it doesn't seem to express reality. But that's what I love about art. Reality is there in your face every day of your life. You know, what's the point? I want my art, and I want to see art that takes me away from the norm, that gives me a different perspective on my day and a different way of looking at my world. You know, I want to escape from reality. Jesus, sometimes reality stinks. You know, we all have crap days, and we all have things that we don't like in our life. So I want art that I see, and the art I create, to remove me from reality. And Francis Bacon was one of those. Yeah, I'm going to sound like contradictory here, but he expressed reality in a form that was purely about the sensation of movement, the sensation of the coupling, and, you know, to a certain degree, the violence of the coupling. You know, when you're having sex and you're really going for it, you know, there is violent movements to the sexual act. and you know, my appreciation of his work and his philosophy of work was something I like. It's something I connect to, and it was just by accident, by doing these effects onto the background, I had this sort of Bacon-esque attitude to it. You know, if you ever seen the Screaming Popes, where the Pope's sitting on his chair with the curtains behind, then perhaps you'll see how the connection is born. Now obviously, once that was done, I've got a funny face going on, and my mouth's there, and it's sort of like half open, and that just spurred me on to say, it just put in my head, there was no other image I could paint on top, apart from having a nipple of a woman's breast in my mouth. You know, this is just a personal thing, you know. It may not be liked by everybody, but I do it for myself, and you know, if you like it, you like it. If you hate it, you hate it. I don't really give a stuff, to be honest. I do it for myself. You know, the people do love it, and the people do leave comments on my work. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. You know, and there's many people out there on Twitter, on Facebook, on Trig, that have left so many positive comments about my artwork. You know, I just love you. You know, it's your praise and your comments and, you know, criticism that, you know, just sort of boosts me, really, because half the time I do things without sort of understanding whether it's worth doing. But get back to this one. Basically, my mouth gave me a visual fantasy in my head of a woman putting her breast in my mouth and being restrained in respect that she could not do anything else but satisfy my need. And that is it. That is what's happened. You know, I don't know, I think it works, and I think the two elements, you know, the painting process and the photographic process, have a lot of things to offer. I mean, to a certain degree, I haven't thought about this in detail, but my normal sexual paintings could not be done to commission. They're done from the imagination, they're done from suggestive marks. You know, paintings are built up, so, you know, someone couldn't commission me to think of a new painting. But this may have something to offer in regard to, I don't know, say you as an individual have a fantasy about a sexual practice, a position, type of person you want to have sex with, an environment you want to have sex in, then perhaps, you know, if someone sent me an image of themselves within that environment, then I can paint a male or female form over the top. That way the fantasy, your fantasy, is there. There you are, you're in your environment where you'd love to have sex or get fucked, and the person you fantasise about having it with and in what nature would be painted by me. So perhaps there's a commissioning element here, there's a future for doing commissions. I don't know, we'll have to see. And just quickly, again, like that one, I've done a negative image, and this one I like in itself, actually, to be honest. I don't know if I want to paint over it, because you've got ghost images here, you know, the people are there, and then there's myself. My leather jacket now looks like a straight jacket, and I don't know, in itself it could sort of represent me in a straight jacket being sort of strangled emotionally and being unable to express my feelings in the context of my environment. So my mind's focused, I'm in focus, but the people around me are just a blur, you know. So I think in itself it's probably a good photograph, but knowing me, I'll experiment, chuck paint on it and ruin it. But that's it really. Not much more I can say. You know, it's just a project I'm starting, and I think it's got a future in it. You know, I do love to experiment, and I do like to try things different. Let me know what you think. That's all I can say really. And there we go. The two finished paintings. Mixed media on canvas, paint and photographic material. One of me here is 12 inches by 12 inches. I've done the background in gloss black paint. Actually, that's a lie. It was just normal acrylic black paint and I put a gloss varnish on. Sorry. Quite like the way it's turned out. As you can see, it's not until you see the finished product that you actually understand what I was trying to get at, where a photographic image becomes part of the painting. When it was on the actual desk, you just saw the photograph with a bit of painting on it, where now you actually see it incorporated into the actual canvas, so it becomes one work on itself. I'm not sure if you can see from here, but I've done enamel paint around the outside to give a sort of indication of looking through a window really, being a little spy, being a little spy on some sexual fantasy. It's good, I like it, you know, I've liked the way it's turned out. As I say, this is only the beginning. These two, the first two I've done in this style, to this concept. You know, there's many avenues to explore. There's, you know, you can look at the actual background image, could be wherever you want it to be. You know, your favourite place where you went on holiday, the favourite place where you go to chill out, where you went on honeymoon. You know, the actual choices of location are just too many to mention really. It's as much as to your imagination or my imagination as allows. You know, you can go from the conservative view, you know, just some woods, to a risque location like a shopping mall, you know, and you add yourself or the imagined person or persons into the realistic reality of the environment, based purely because it's a photograph. This one has actually turned out quite Bacon-esque. As I said, you know, he's one of my favourite artists. I just wish I could have met him in his lifetime. This one here measures 16 by 12. This one is actually on a matte background, and I think actually this is the way to go, because what it does create is a contrast between certain elements. I mean, the photographic part of the background is obviously gloss. Well, it's not obvious, is it, because it could be matte, but it is on this occasion gloss. And the border paint around here, there's a sort of semi-gloss appearance to it. So the actual matte outer edge allows a contrast, and it also marries up with the actual painted figures, which are still in matte. So, you know, lessons learned, that is the way to go. The gloss background doesn't work. What I did try on one of the drawings I'd done earlier on was to gloss varnish over the canvas and the photographic image. And for those of you who do know, this is going to sound quite rudimentary, but I didn't realise the actual ink of the photograph would run. I ended up with a multitude of colours and a complete and utter mess. But that is what, to me, art is about. It's about experimentation, going down different avenues, not sticking to a routine technique. You know, perhaps that's part of my character. I get very bored easily. I do like a sense of fun, and I do that in the painting. The seriousness is in regard to the concept or messages I want to portray and get across. You know, I take art seriously. You know, I have loads of fun, and I've got my silly little side, but to me art is a serious side of my life. And I don't know, sort of standing here now looking at them, 2 days ago it was an idea, 2 days ago it was a sort of vision in my head, and there it is. What more can you ask? You know, I find art the most invigorating what other word can I use? I don't know, it just gives you utter freedom. There is no rules, you can paint what you want to paint, but it comes from the idea. And that is part of what I say actually, is that art has two sides to it. You've got the actual painting process, you've got the actual creation of the art, but there's also the creative imagination process. The two, you hope, come together to give you a finished result. But ultimately everything starts from an idea. Everything starts with inspiration, aims, whatever you may want to call them. But basically they're little ideas in your head. Personally, for me, I can't get rid of them. Every day I wake up, every day I walk around, I see parts of the human body in the most inanimate objects you could imagine. You know, and water and toothpaste, when it comes out, it sort of like represents so many aspects of the sexual experience that, you know, my mind's a constant confusion of ideas. If I didn't paint, I do believe I'd go nuts, because the actual half of the creative process where you actually create the art, the painting itself, is the release. As I say, art is serious. I take it very seriously, and I also have fun with it. I very often get surprised by different ways that things come out, but sometimes, to me, art can be a burden. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean I'm going to give up tomorrow, but what it does mean is sometimes, you know, you want to get up on a nice sunny day and go for a walk and enjoy the walk with your partner, your wife, your husband, or whatever it may be, and enjoy the day. You want to, you know, sit down and read sometimes. But wherever I go, whatever I do, even if I sit there and watch TV, there's elements within my vision, whether when I'm walking or watching on TV, that spring ideas in my head about different things I can do. So it's basically like having, I don't know, a 1,000,000-piece jigsaw rattling around in your head, and then every so often you can sit down and put some pieces together, hope they fit, and end up with a finished work. Never was good at jigsaws, but the old art side of it, it's not too bad. Yeah, sometimes you wish you could switch off. And the business side of it, trying to organise exhibitions, trying to get your work shown, that just drives me crazy. You know, if some sort of little fairy came down, or angel came down and just said to me, Mark, don't worry about the business side of it, you just get out there with your brushes and whatever you want to work with, we'll deal with it. That would be my ultimate aim in life, to be free from the burden of actually looking into the business aspects, doing marketing, visiting galleries, contacting galleries. You know, it's so boring. You know, I just want to get the work on. It's boring. Last thing I want to do is bore people. But, you know, someone else to take the business aspect off my head or off my shoulders. I think that's about it really. I don't want to talk anymore for the sake of boring you. But I hope it's sort of demonstrated here that a bit about my painting process really. Ideas come in every minute of my day, and I have to sit down or stand at an easel or stand at the canvas, whatever it may be, but I have to get the work out of my head. It's not a hobby. I work full time to earn money to pay the bills like everyone else does, and I do this in my spare time. But it's not a hobby. I go to work to earn money, but that's not my life. This is my life, you know. And the ultimate aim is that I do it all the time, so that I don't work for someone else and get paid a little bit of pennies for it. This is what it's about. Hopefully, if I get a few comments back, I must admit the old comments are a bit thin on the ground, but if the whole aspect of seeing me paint, seeing the work finished, and me talking a load of rubbish, or, you know, it depends on which way you look at it, but me talking about the art and waffling on, then let me know. If you think it is a good idea, then I'll do more of them. I must admit I probably won't do any more videos for probably about a month, because I need to now sit down and concentrate on the painting, because the actual aspects of filming and painting at the same time, it don't work for me. You know, I just want to go in my little studio, switch off, throw some paint about, see a few breasts come out, buttocks and this, that and the other. Oh yeah, in regards to a question that's posed to me, why do I not paint the male figure more dominant, or why do I not paint two men together? Really, I don't know. At the moment, I think it's probably based on I paint what inspires me, and the female form is what inspires me. I've also been asked, why do I paint a woman in a submissive role? I don't know. There's probably some deep part of me, something in my psyche that says, you know, I like to be in control. But it's probably just thinking off the cuff really. There's probably more to it than meets the eye. Yeah, we all have sexual fantasies. I have sexual fantasies, and I express some of it in paint. You know, I don't see it as dirty. This is a natural thing. Painting me is natural. Having sex is natural. Your interpretations and the way you express yourself and put yourself upon your partner, and they in return, there's just so much you can learn about each other. Sex is a healthy thing in all its shapes and forms. I don't see pornography as really bad. Pornography is stimulating, can offer avenues of experimentation that you probably wouldn't think about. I don't regard my art as pornographic, I regard it as art in itself. It doesn't mean pornography is not connected. You know, as long as the right people are watching it and above the age of consent, and every person involved in a sexual experience is actively wanting to be in that position, then, you know, I find the whole sex industry in itself very fascinating. There's so many things out there, so many ways of sexual expression. I think that's why I've gone down this avenue of painting what I do. For those of you who don't know, I used to paint landscapes, I used to paint flowers, I used to paint pretty little scenes. And there was something in the back of my head that said to me, Mark, you ain't destined to just paint pretty trees. So last year I went down this route of painting works based on sexual experience, and I've never looked back. I find it sometimes quite scary how the ideas just flow out of my head, and from an idea it ends up on a canvas, and there it is. You know. I think there's a lot more I can talk about art in general and my arts, but I'll leave that for later on. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, let me know. I'll change it. You know, if there's aspects of this whole thing you enjoy, great. Nice to hear a bit of praise. But if you don't like some aspects of it, tell me what they are, and then I'll look into working on it and making it a little bit more professional, or a bit more fun, a bit more informative. I know when I'm actually videoing myself working, I don't talk a lot, so that's something I need to deal with. Perhaps I need to get someone to actually do the filming. There's one final sort of thing I was going to talk about, and that's the aspect of using me in the paintings. This one here, I'm obviously dressed. In regard to painting me or photographing me in the nude and then superimposing the fantasy figures over the top, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I'm not sure if that's a good avenue to go down. But I'm happy with my body, but I'm not happy about everyone else looking at it and thinking, whoa, there's something strange going on here. That man's seen a bit of life. You know, better days. But even if I did put myself on a canvas or in a photographic element nude, I would not be showing my bits. I may be showing my buttocks, but that'd be it. I want to do it, but I'm not sure how I can do it tastefully and at the same time not put people off their food. Anyway, that's it. I'm signing off now. I've got to get this film onto the computer, go have something to eat, a few beers and chill. So, good night. One over there. I want 3. Don't know why. 4 is an equal number I don't like. I don't like equal numbers. And 5.